We're rolling, and I think we're good. Okay.
Well, you're happy I am too.
Yeah, so am I. All right, Sunday, 18 March 2007. I'm here with Lieutenant Colonel Gil McDowell, U.S. Air Force retired, and we're going to talk about his experience in World War II as a downed pilot and captured prisoner of war. So, Lieutenant Colonel McDowell, could you give us a brief introduction of yourself?
In December 7th, 1941, I was in high school. We just got home from church. My dad said, get out the guns. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor. Most of us didn't even know where Pearl Harbor was. We had no idea what it was about. So my two older brothers immediately joined the service. I hadn't finished high school yet. So after I finished high school, then I said, well, it's time to go in the service. So I went down recruiting, and they said, where do you want to go? I said, I don't care. I just want to go and do whatever it takes to win the war. I'd be glad to do anything. Which was not a right idea. They said, well, we'll have to send you down to basic, and we gave you some aptitude tests and all that stuff. So they said, well, you're very mechanically inclined. We're going to send you to a special school. So they sent me to Lowry Air Force Base, Colorado. I went to a very special school, a secret school for the bomb site maintenance. So we riding the streetcar, went downtown Denver one day. Get off the streetcar, and this same Uncle Sam pointed and said, you too can wear silver wings. I said, heck, Jack, let's go apply for pilot training. We may not get through, but at least we'll get out of this job. So we got on the next streetcar going back to the base, went to personnel, and said, we want to apply for pilot training. He said, well, they'd be glad to have you. If you got a high school, we finished high school. Go down to the hospital right now and take physical. And we come back. We went down, mainly they just checked our eyes, we could see. They could see we could walk and everything else. We went back, and the girl had signed this application volunteering to go to pilot training. 2 weeks later, we were on a troop train going to Santa Ana, California for training. Got out of that cotton picking job. So otherwise, we could stay there forever.
Your flight training was in California?
Well, basic.
Basic, okay.
In Santa Ana, California.
Where did you go to flight training?
Went to Tulare. I said, what did I go to first? Went to Tulare for PT, which is an OB, what am I trying to say? Steerman.
Mm-hmm.
And then went to the BT-13, which is a faulty vibrator. And then their graduation went to AT-6 at Williams Air Force Base in California, in Arizona. So I was 3 places in California. Santa Ana, Tulare, and Chico. And then went to Williams for AT-6 training. Then from there, where'd I go? I went to Richmond, Virginia, started flying a P-47. From there I went to Seymour Johnson, North Carolina, more P-47 training. Then the Bluthal Field, where we got what they call replacement training for overseas units. And so we did that.
So when you went to that overseas unit training, you knew you were going over to the war?
Yes.
Well, how was your family affected by that?
Everybody was agreed. Everybody had to go to fight the war, fight the Japanese.
But when you went, you probably thought you were going to be gone for a long time.
It was for the duration. You went overseas for the duration.
And
the most exciting thing we did in my overseas training, is we'd go up with an instructor, one on each wing, and then we'd break and fly for 1 minute, and then come back and try to shoot each other down by camera, of course. And we went all up and down the sky, all over the place, and finally I was climbing up behind him, and he knew I was going to cut him off. And so he said he pulled tight as he could, and I could see he couldn't hit me. So I tried to get away from him. And what I did with cross control is a snap roll went right up through his airplane, cutting in two right behind the cockpit. And laid the propeller back around my cowling. I didn't see what happened to him. For a while, the rear end part of his airplane hung on mine, and then it finally fell off. And by that time, I'd lost the airspeed, and I was falling out of the sky. And I was getting ready to bail out, and I looked down there, a huge cow pasture. That cow pasture was the biggest cow pasture I've ever seen. Well, I just landed there. So I just dropped down and And they had the wheels up, of course, and a cow pasture. I don't know where Jimmy Lynch, that was his name. I don't know where he went. I lost Stalag. They found some guys who were woodcutters, put me on a horse and wagon, or a buggy. Took me several miles down the road to the only guy in the area that had a telephone, and that was a cranky phone. I finally got word back to the base that it had, but as I was going down, I called Mayday, Mayday, mid-air collision. An instructor who was down on the auxiliary field trying to make out with a WAF down there, he jumped in his airplane and took off and tried to find it. He had no idea where the hell he went. And
Was he ever found?
they found him, but
In
he
one
was,
piece?
he was a mess. When my plane hit his control cables, the jerk on his stick broke his wrist, and the jerk of the right rudder broke his right ankle. And he knew he was in a hell of a mess. So real quick he pulled his ripcord on his left hand, dislocated both of his shoulders. When he landed, he knew his right foot was hurt. He landed perfectly, all his weight on his right leg. His left leg broke in 3 places. And so when I got back to the base, it was early the next morning, but I told them to go pick him up first, which they did. Went down to the hospital to find him, and the nurse said, well, his wife's in there now, you have to wait till his wife comes out. So I said, I'm sitting out in the hallway. Of course, we had name tags on the suit, McDowell. She said, McDowell, oh! I said, threw her arms around me and said, oh, thank you, thank you. I said, just the doctor here, this one's in shock. He said, no, 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 now he doesn't have to go overseas. The poor guy.
Well, tell me about your initial flight training. What kind of parachuting training did you do as a pilot?
We went up 20 foot on this cable, hooked onto a cable, slid down that cable, and rolled. That was our training. Except they told us you can pull, if you bail out, you can pull a riser in the direction you want to go. So you can do that. Which I did later, after I got shot down. I had to bail out.
You didn't do any actual jumps?
Nope.
And this was in California and all these other places that you went? Or is it just one-time thing?
Just one time.
And where was that?
That was in North Carolina. And then we were going overseas, you had a chance of getting shot down. And I guess before that, they weren't supposed to bail out. So we wore parachutes, we had the seat pack parachutes.
Yeah.
But,
Where in North Carolina?
Blumenthal and Seymour Jansen. What's the other side? Goldsboro. That's one of them.
Did you ever hear of Camp McCall?
Nope.
Okay. So you had a parachute you wore on your seat. What was its number, its designation? T something,
I just know
T10?
The standard round canopy.
And just slip and pull?
Yep.
Pretty much at the mercy of the wind. Well, in your pilot training, your flight training, give me some stuff on your survival training. Were you trained in any type of resistance? Survival?
I hope you can find some friendly natives in the country and ask them to help you get out. And most of them will if they like you. But it all depends on who finds you first.
They didn't teach you how to build a fire and
Nope.
lean-to or catch a fish?
Nope.
Wow.
You're supposed to learn that when you were a kid back home, I guess.
I would think as a pilot, you might end up behind enemy lines. You need some kind of special skills. They didn't teach any of that. Interesting. Well, in your combat training, rules of engagement, that sort of thing, were you given any instruction or classes on the law of land warfare?
No. All our training was identifying enemy aircraft and friendly aircraft. They flash them up there in a few seconds to name that airplane.
Well, as a
Identification, friend or foe.
as a military person at high risk of capture, did they not train you or teach you anything about the Geneva Convention?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Name, rank, and serial number.
That's it.
That's the training. I'll give you name, rank, and serial number.
Did they ask you or tell you what the enemy might do,
Nope.
or what they
They
expected
said
the
you're
enemy?
supposed to make every effort to escape.
But they didn't teach you how to escape, how to
Nope.
cook up things. Did you take any ground branch training as a pilot? In other words, okay, you're a pilot, but did they train you in any close air support? Like if you would be a combat controller on
Yep.
the ground?
We didn't have them. That came later, much later.
Later? Later in the war?
Later in the war, yes.
Is that something, lessons learned, or something they just figured out? Or
Yeah, they found out that we need spotters to contact the Air Force. A lot of times they didn't understand each other. The Air Force didn't understand what the people on the ground were saying, the soldiers. But so they started putting a pilot, an experienced pilot, with the forward controllers of the Army. And they explained to the people what they wanted to hit and what they wanted to not hit.
But we're going ahead into the future a little bit, but when you're in the European theater, who was the American force over there? Was it Army, or were they any others like Navy?
Well, they had Navy support all around the ports to move people back and forth across the canal. Very little Marines. Marines meant primarily to the Pacific.
So your communication, how was that with the other services, U.S. services?
We didn't, as far as I'm concerned. I just waited till I got assigned to a mission and flew it.
So there's no synchronized communication?
No.
Okay. And even Army and Army Air Force, the
Nope.
the communication synchronization
The-
is difficult.
The capability of the UHF radio and the VHF radio were very limited.
Wow. Okay, so you're a pilot now. Were you an officer when you became a pilot?
Yes.
So you're probably a second lieutenant.
Brand new second lieutenant.
And you're shipped overseas. How'd you get over there? Did you fly, or
No, we didn't have airplanes to fly that far.
the P-47 couldn't make it across the
No,
pond?
hardly.
No mid-air refueling, huh?
We went by boat. It was a long ride.
Okay. So you ended up in Europe. Where'd you?
Going overseas, the ships always zigzagged back and forth
Yeah.
to avoid the submarines. And they made it very clear, if you fall overboard, we're not going to do anything. You're on your own.
Were there any?
We're not going to stop the ship to pick up anybody that falls off.
Were there any interesting events on your passage?
Very boring.
No.
I decided, it didn't take me long to decide I don't want to go in the Navy.
No wolf packs that you saw or knew of?
Never saw a thing.
They probably wouldn't have told you, huh?
Nope.
So you end up in Europe.
Went to Europe in the 8th Air Force
And that was where?
in southeast England.
How was the host nation?
Oh, very well. Especially the girls. The men didn't like us. The British men,
Competition?
huh? There's only, all the Americans are overpaid, oversexed, and over here. No. They didn't care for much American. The Yanks. The bloody Yanks.
But all in all,
Well, I was
were
very
they good hosts?
Very friendly, yes.
Could you tell, or could you have a sense of relief from them that you were there? Because
No.
didn't England, weren't they desperately trying to get the U.S. over there to help them out? Could you sense any relief on them, on their part?
No. They were too busy dodging bombs from coming in from Germany. And buzz bombs and rockets.
Hmm.
The people I ran into were usually girls at some bar. They didn't talk about much of that.
So you flew the P-47. What was that all about? Describe briefly that.
It was really designed for high altitude. But after I was transferred to the 9th Air Force, all our missions were close support to the Army, which the airplane was very well built for. with the 450 calibers in each wing. And they could tear up a whole lot. You
And
get 850 calibers hitting something.
So the aircraft was designed for as close air support?
No, it was designed for high altitude
So as a fighter?
as a fighter, yes. But they found out that it's one of the best ground support airplanes they had.
How did the regular Joes on the ground, how did they perceive it?
They'd love to see them come over. Especially when they were, one of the first missions I went on, there was American tank forces screaming for help. So we went to the coordinates they gave us. There was one Tiger tank chasing 6 of our airplanes down the road, or 6 of our tanks down the road. Our tanks were, the range of our guns was not near the same as the 88. The 88 millimeter was a hell of a lot more powerful than any of the guns we had. And it could be used anti-aircraft or anything, anti-tank, anti-personnel. It was a fantastic gun. But most of the time we just, if we had, sometimes we dropped napalm on the tanks and roast everybody inside. And,
Do you ever hear about what the Germans felt of the P-47?
oh yes, it was Terrorflieger.
What does that mean?
It was terrible as a terror airplane.
So they respected it,
Yes,
just
indeed.
like you respected the Panther,
Yes. No,
or no, was it Tiger tank?
Tiger tank.
Okay, yeah.
The Panther was also one of their tanks, but Tiger was the most popular. They had more Tigers than anything else.
So on that P-47, along with the armament, was there any other special equipment on board?
No.
And
We started getting rockets. But the other squadrons got them first, and people hated them when they first came out. Because when they farmed, they didn't know where in the hell they were going to go. They got to do corkscrews and do loops and everything else. And after wasting a whole lot of them, the technicians came over and said, well, no wonder. You're mistreating the damn things, you're betting all the fins in all kinds of directions. The people who were handling them on the ground were just a bunch of airmen who wanted to stick them here, stick them there. And they didn't realize that this least bend in those fins made all the difference. So they started lining them up, and they could hit something with them. But I heard a story of one P-51 pilot shot himself down. It did a loop, came back to hit him.
all because of a bent fin.
Yeah.
And so you strapped yourself in this flying gas can
Yeah.
with a parachute on your rear end, and flew at high altitude.
Nope.
Did you suffer any cold weather injuries while you were flying that high?
Not in France. We didn't go that high.
Why is that?
Because all we were looking for was stuff on the ground. We weren't worrying about it.
Okay, so when you were there, I guess you were transitioned immediately into close
Yes.
air support.
Well, I spent 1 month in a replacement pool, because they knew the invasion's coming, they're going to lose a lot of people. So I don't know how many hundreds of pilots we had in a replacement pool. But then after it stripped down to St. Mary-Église in France, 3 of us got transferred from the 8th to the 9th Air Force.
And the 9th was where? Where was that station?
To begin with, it was in England, but then we transferred over to France. As they built more and more fields, more and more of the 9th Air Force moved over to France.
And this was after the
After the invasion.
Right.
Yeah. But no, all our job was just go, to begin with, stop tanks and drop bombs on gun emplacements and everything else that they wanted to hit. In fact, when we first got over there, you could watch our other people go strafing, going up, come back and land. Somebody else would jump in the airplane when they put fuel and ammunition on it, and they take off. No time at all, they're over there strafing again, you could watch them. It was a lot of fun shooting up the convoys. The only thing I didn't like doing, they have a whole lot of stuff was horse-drawn. I mean, they have trucks that couldn't run, but the horses were pulling them. They had wagons and everything else. And being raised on a farm, I did not like shooting those damn poor horses, but they had to do it anyhow.
And is that because their resources were
They didn't have
depleting
fuel. And
at that
a
time?
lot of their airplanes, a lot of meat vehicles had been broken down, and they didn't have the equipment to replace the new engines or whatever. As long as had wheels on it, the horses could tow it.
So you're over there with the 9th, somewhere in France, right?
Right.
What was your general opinion of the enemy?
We all hated them. I mean, actually, they're a bunch of evil guys and all that sort of stuff. Of course, they were just a bunch of people who was given an assignment, and this is your job. But strafing trains was a lot of fun. It's the best mission, one of the best missions I ever went on. I had to dive bomb the train. I had one in each wing. And I got 2 cars with it. There's train cars. I was so lucky that a lot of times you don't know where the hell the bombs are. They weren't guided. You just hope they went where you want them to go. But then later I found out, no telling who was in those cars. Could be civilians. Sometimes it was prisoners of war and everything else in there. But our job was to stop that train.
So the Germans didn't bother to mark their trains as
No.
POW.
Mm-mm.
I wonder why. What was your feeling about the French over there?
I knew very little bit what they were doing. We heard in our Stars and Stripes, we get a little bit of reports what they were doing. But they were not a big governing force anyway. They were trying to regroup and everything, but
Did you know of General de Gaulle?
oh yes, we heard about it.
How was he perceived? If you
Well, the whole French army was, everyone figured, well, they'll quit the first chance they get. They're very good at surrendering.
And then when the Allies safely secured France, in comes de Gaulle.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing happened.
Yep.
So how did you guys consider the fighting capability of the other Allied forces, like the Brits?
Poor compared to ours.
Really?
Yeah. They were much more careful. They didn't want like Patton, for example. He wasn't too concerned about who got killed and who didn't. He said, keep moving. Find them and kill them.
Now, are you talking about all Brit forces in general, or just on the ground or in the air? Or?
Montgomery was controlling them. And what we could learn from our leaders, he was very cautious. He was very unhappy because Roosevelt has insisted that Eisenhower be put in charge, and he thought he should be put in charge. It was his war, not Eisenhower's. So he was rather reluctant to go charging against the enemy. Played his cards very carefully.
Do you remember Operation Market Garden?
Yep.
That was in Montgomery.
Yep.
That didn't go too well for him, did it?
Well, I don't know why they assumed the Germans not going to shoot him when they come over there. I don't know what they expected. Just walk in there with no resistance. A bunch of people jump in there and take over. But the Germans had it pretty well controlled.
Yeah. Well, some say that was a pretty bold move on Montgomery, and some say it was kind of stupid.
It was bold and stupid.
How about any of the Polish
Never had
forces?
any contact with them. I knew that there was some in the next compound in the prison camp, but I had no experience with them. They didn't fly anything that we flew.
How about the Russians?
They were way off. But they did a pretty good job because Hitler insisted that you cannot retreat. Primarily, the German forces had very little supplies, very little fuel, and no way of keeping them warm. And most of them froze, they didn't feel like fighting. So, but they weren't allowed to retreat. Couldn't do it.
Now we talked a little bit about the French. During your briefings, your flight briefings, etc., preparation for combat, were you ever told anything about the French underground and resistance that might help you?
We know we're there, but we had no way of knowing to find them. That we have to depend on them finding us. Though we have no names or addresses or anything for who to contact.
So there is no briefings or preparation for possible assisted evasion if you got shot down. You just heard of them.
If they found you, which they did find, rescued a lot of people. But none is organized as anything were in later wars.
Well, during your time there, they were operating, and they had a pretty good system, for evasion, and they worked with U.S. and British special operations, the OSS and the SOE. Can you tell me anything about them that you?
The British had an aircraft that went land in a cow pasture or wherever it was, and they bring the people out of the woods where they had them hidden, put them on an airplane, and the airplane go back to England. But those poor devils, if they were caught by the Germans, they immediately shot. There was no question that the death penalty for them assisting anybody escape, if the Germans found out they were eliminated.
So I guess in a nutshell, you got your mission briefing, and you were told, hey, there might be somebody that might be there to assist you with aid.
No. We didn't know where we were going to get shot down anyhow. Most of the time, all of our flights were very close to the front line. We didn't go very far inside. If the Army had nothing for us to hit, then they'd say, we'll go in deep and hit transportation.
So your plan for survival evasion was
Luck.
So the Army Air Corps didn't give you any kind of special instructions like nowadays, air tasking order, all that stuff that would help an isolated person evade. None of that was given.
Nope. They didn't have the equipment to go in and pick them up, which they have now.
You just hope that if you got shot down and landed, there would be a resistance or an OSS somewhere there to
Somebody
help
would
get
come
you out.
along and hide you and move you. Each day you go from one house to another house. A lot of them would work clear all the way back, go to Spain, come back from Spain. Some of them would go to Belgium and get on a fishing boat back across the canal out of Belgium.
Before you went out on a mission, were you even told, hey, if you're captured and become a POW and then become liberated, you can't fly anymore in that particular theater? Were you told anything?
Nope, you could volunteer if you wanted to. You didn't have to. They really didn't want you to go, because if you found a way to escape and you got captured, they figured you might reveal how you got, who was down there and what the location was. So the Germans would immediately know people in this particular area are helping people escape.
So what was the standing order then? If somebody was shot down and evaded, you couldn't fight.
Well, no. Sometimes you get back to your own squadron. You were sent back to your squadron.
So there was never any evasion plan of action, unassisted.
Nope.
There wasn't any
Yeah,
safe areas, selected areas for evasion, none of that. Just kind of made it up.
The areas were changing all the time anyhow, as our forces kept advancing.
If you were shot, well, obviously you were. Let's say you got shot down. Was there any plan for the Allied air forces to provide cover for you as
No.
you evaded?
When you got shot down, you're just on your own. In fact, we have thousands of people shot down in the bombers. And there's no way they could ever go pick them up.
Well, let's talk about your capture. What led to your capture? What, just basically describe everything from the air, then when you hit the ground.
Yeah, we were sent to go in deep to stop transportation. So this big long train sitting out there. At practice, we'd go across at high speed strafing and see if it had any protection. And we went across it, and I didn't see any kind of protection. So I called it an easy target, because radio conversation kept very short. He'd say hot target or easy target. And then you shut up. And everybody else then would take turns going down low speed, shooting it up. So I started going back down. Boxcar doors were coming open, some of them the roof was opening up. And I figured, what is going on? And about that time I found out. Because balls of fire kept coming out of that airplane. The first hit I got was right in the engine. And I got one explosion in the right wing. So I was strafing right across the field, then got out of range. But I had oil flying back over the canopy. The oil pressure went down to 0 in no time. And then the cylinder temperature started going up. Up to the peg. But in the meantime, I was headed back toward friendly territory. But the propeller had been damaged by the first hit I got. And every time I tried to advance my power, the whole engine would just shake like crazy. And so first it's going to shake itself loose. So I just gradually climbed up to 7,000 feet, and it quit. So it just froze up. I had no choice but to open the canopy and go over the side.
So that was your first real parachute ride.
Yeah, that was my first practice ride, and the only one I ever wanted.
What was that like?
Well, it wasn't scary because I knew I had to get on the ground. I couldn't go with the airplane. But
This is in daylight?
The training was, you can guide the parachute to a certain extent, pulling risers on the direction you want to go. And I see these people coming out of this town.
It was in daylight?
This was about 5:30 in the afternoon. These people coming out of the town, and I knew they were shooting at me, but they got these puffs of smoke. I knew they were far away, they couldn't hit me. But anyhow, trying to go to these woods over here and pulling on these risers, pretty soon I realized the wind's going by too fast. I looked up there and the parachute was just flopping like this. So in my panic, I had dumped the damn parachute. So I let everything go. And I looked, I'm going to die right down there because I filled the parachute. And it filled up again, thank God, and this release on the parachute harness hit me in the mouth, broke a tooth, ripped my nose, and so I landed in the edge of the woods where I wanted to go, but I didn't realize that all that brush was growing up through a bunch of barbed wire entanglements. So I landed in barbed wire entanglements, and I got a bunch of scratches on my legs and my hands and everything for landing in barbed wire. And I said, now I had it. I could hear them shooting, and pretty soon I hear bullets whistling overhead. I said, well, I got to get out of here. And I really don't remember how I got out of that barbed wire. I know I ran into the woods, and there was a big ditch, zigzag back and forth. And I went into that ditch. There was a dug for soft tanks, and I had to stick my fingers because it was wet and muddy. It had rained early that morning. And I climbed up one of the edges, went into the woods, saw the big brush pile. I said, well, I'll just get out of there. So I crawled into that brush pile, and then late at night I could hear dogs coming, dogs barking. I said, well, I got to get out of here. So I went out the woods the same direction I was going. And I got to the edge of the woods, there was a little road out there, a little dirt road. I was walking down the road, someone hollered, halt. So I stopped. He said, comrade, and I said, yeah, yeah. And he asked me something again. I know it asked for what my organization, whatever it was. So I decided to act like a drunk German soldier. So I said, ach, scheiße, good knock. I started walking down the road, and he hollered, halt. So I stopped again. He said, comrade, and I said, yeah, yeah. And he asked the same question again. I have no idea what the hell he said. So I started walking again. He fired over my head. I said, well, I better stop. So he got my 45 out. It had its own safety. Took the safety off. I could see him behind a tree. The dark as hell, but I could out and see he was over there. When he gets close enough, I just blow him away. So I'm standing there, waiting for him to get close, and I heard, I looked over here, and there's a rifle right here. Where that guy, I had no idea where that guy came from, but that rifle was about 2 feet away from my head. So I just put my hands up with my rifle, 45 in my hand. The guy that was going to tell me to halt and all that, he came up and searched me all over.
They didn't take the gun out of your
He
hand.
didn't know I had the hand. He figured it'd be in my hand.
And how many of them were there?
Two. One guy was standing with a rifle, and the other one had a rifle, but he put it on his shoulder.
Did you think about popping them?
Hmm? I thought about it, but he had a rifle right to my head. So
Not an option then.
they motioned for me to go down the hill, so I went down the hill, and they walked behind me. And I got to this little town down there, and went in the house. All the floors were covered with straw, and a bunch of soldiers, some of them sleeping still, I guess, coming on and off duty.
There was no immediate battlefield interrogation
No.
going on then. They didn't
There was,
ask you questions.
but people didn't know what the hell was going on, except they were stationed there, that's all they knew. But later that afternoon, I spent the rest of the night there, and in the afternoon, this Luft major, they had the most beautiful uniforms anybody in the world. They were beautiful. He came in and introduced himself and he said, you're now my mate, you're my prisoner. I had no idea what difference that would make. Somebody's prisoner, I don't care whether it's his or somebody else's. And he said, we know how you're treating our people and having prison camp in the States. We get letters from them talking about they're living better there than they ever lived in Germany. They're eating better. And every Saturday night, the USO has girls come in, they have dances. And most of them will work out on farms. They're eating much better on the farm than ever here. He says a lot of them are having affairs with the farmers' daughters and some of the wives and everything else. And it's like some of them stopped going back to camp. They just stayed farm with the girls. But anyhow, he said, I'll see that you go to a Luft camp. He said, there's no town, no jail or anything here for these people to hold you. They're ready to turn you over to the Gestapo.
So what was so special about a Luftwaffe camp?
Because it would be treated by the Luftwaffe, not by the Wehrmacht or the SS. So he had somebody go out and get a taxi, a wagon, a one-horse wagon, a cart. And while they were going to get that, he started to question me. He said, where's your weapon? That's why I lost it in the woods. And he said, well, open your mouth. He knew what to check for. He looked at my mouth and found the escape compass we had. And he said, take off your shirt. So I took my shirt off and had a silk map wrapped around my waist, which we used in the escape map. And he started laughing. He took it. He said, what happened to your weapon? I said, I lost it in the woods. He said, you didn't have it when they searched you? I said, no. So he said, where's your flight jacket? I said, it's on that peg over there. So he went and got it, plunk, it hit the floor. He picked it up and it had the 45 in the side pocket. He said, Lieutenant, where'd you have this for the camera? I said, in my hand. I said, I stand here with hold it in my right hand. He started laughing. He said, you're kidding. I said, no. He said, and they searched you? I said, yes. One of them patted me all over, and then they motioned me to go down the hill. So I put the 45 back in my jacket. And he said, laugh like crazy. And they screamed and hollered. So they went out and found the two guys who had captured me, brought them in, and he questioned them in German, of course. I don't know what the hell he was saying, but he was very unhappy. And he turned to me again and said, Lieutenant, they swear they searched you and you didn't have a weapon. I said, well, I had it in my hand. And he started laughing again. So he took it, walked over, put it right in their forehead. I thought he was going to blow their heads off. He came back and talked to me some more. He said, "You said had this in your hand?" I said, "Yes." And he went back and slapped both of them with the 45. And then he told me, he said, "Well, you're going to go to the Luft camp." So they did.
So what was the name of the camp?
Well, the first place I went was an interrogation center in Frankfurt. And then spent 3 days there being interrogated.
What was that like?
Very limited food. They had black bread. Found out later, the bread was 50% sawdust. And I said, "Well, I'm an officer, you got to feed me better than this." I swear, I took one bite of that bread. They brought it back to me that evening. One bite. So I guess I'm going to eat it. So, yeah, after you get hungry enough, that bread tastes like cake. It was really delicious.
So 3 days in an interrogation facility in Frankfurt.
Yeah.
And name, rank, and serial number?
Name, rank, and serial number. He asked me questions that I actually did not know. How many people in your squadron? I actually didn't know how many people in the squadron. I think we have a list of men, and a lieutenant colonel and a major and one captain and the best of lieutenants and all the ground personnel. And he said, well, he identified my squadron. He said, "We've recovered your airplane. We know what squadron you're with." And he said, "You graduated from Williams Air Force Base, Williams Army Air Base." And he pulled out an English copy of my graduation list of everybody in my class. He showed it to me.
How did he get that, or how did he know that?
He got it from somebody in the country, in this country, and sent it to him. They had a list of everybody in my graduating class. Then he said, "You went to London on R&R," and he named the 3 people who went with me on R&R. And so after we got in prison camp later on, I met John Sullivan, who was with me when we went to London. He said, he said, like a stupid ass, I had a copy of my flight orders in my pocket, but I didn't take them out.
So the word operational security wasn't really enforced back then, or thought of.
Well, we're all told, empty your pockets, don't take anything.
Yeah.
That people didn't take it too seriously, because they weren't going to get shot down anyhow.
So while you were being interrogated for those 3 days, were you treated humanely?
Oh yes, in isolation, all by yourself, eating very little.
Did they ever use any physical force?
No.
For those 3 days, the initial, and they were trying to get what, battlefield tactical and intelligence.
But I kept saying, yeah, I'm just a second lieutenant. When they schedule me for a fly mission, I fly the mission and go where they tell me to go.
Did you consider that facility in Frankfurt harsh?
No. It was cold.
Yeah, but
They didn't have any.
as you said, no harsh treatment.
Their air conditioning was not up to date.
So after that, you were moved to?
A long train ride to Poland, to Stalag 3, near Sagan on the Oder. And that was, the main thing there wasn't enough food. By Hitler's orders, we were supposed to be the same rations as an unemployed civilian. Thank God the Red Cross parcels came in. We didn't get as many as we were supposed to. We're supposed to get one a week. That's what the International Red Cross thought. But the German people, everybody in that camp was taking their share. They all ate much better than we did.
So they were low on resources, and they limited your food intake.
Yes.
And it's not because they were
They
cruel, it's just because they didn't have the resources.
They didn't have it. And they told us that Hitler had ordered all prisoners of done away with. Because they're losing the war against the Russians, and they want to take everybody to serving as guards in prison camps and send them to fight the Russians. But they were all ex-airmen that were shot down. Most of them were crippled, couldn't fly anymore. And they said, "But we won't shoot you. We won't kill you. But if the Gestapo comes in here and you see them setting up machine guns, whatever you've got, attack them with them, because they're coming in there to eliminate you all, but by Hitler's orders."
And this is the Luftwaffe.
Yes, it's the people with the cards of
Your captors,
our capture.
having a Luftwaffe affiliation,
Yeah.
were telling you what to do if the Gestapo
If
arrived.
the Gestapo comes in, the only reason they're coming in here would be to shoot you because Hitler's ordered you all be done away with.
So your stay there at Stalag Luft 3, you remember your senior ranking officer?
General Spivey.
Who?
General Spivey. But he has things pretty well organized. It made it very clear. The chances of trying to escape on your own, you just can't make it.
Was there, so they had an escape committee?
They had so many talented people to believe. They could take all scraps of things and make a uniform or make it look like civilian clothes and everything else. But you made it very clear you're not going to try to escape in this. We put you on the committee, and people have been here the longest. People who can speak the language, because you have very little chance of getting out across Germany if you can't speak the language. Then, if you could speak Polish while we're in Poland, you'd be all right. You could bluff your way.
Before you even went on your final mission, did you know anything about that? If you became a POW, that you'd be required to try to escape and
Oh, yes. But they made it very clear that once you got to camp, it was organized. First of all, you had to put food away, stashing food somewhere, so that while you're escaping, you have food to carry with you. And so they always had food hidden in different places. In the Red Cross parcels, we get powdered milk and chocolate bars and raisins and different things. They melt them down, mix them all up, and make what we call an escape bar. It's a very nourishing bar with powdered milk and raisins and chocolate. It was hard as a rock, it wasn't dry. And so that's what we're going to use to eat along the way wherever you're going to go.
So during your captivity, to keep yourself busy, you worked on things like this.
Oh, yes.
And even though General Spivey said you probably won't be able to escape, you guys still kept an escape committee going.
Yeah, the only chance of escaping this is in the winter, when everything's covered with snow. You might be able to escape by covering yourself with a sheet and a lot of it. There's a limit to how far you can go. You're a hell of a long ways from England.
Stalag 3 Luft Sagen, is that the
Sagen on the order.
is that the same one that
The people
inspired the movie The Great Escape?
Yep. British. 76 of them escaped.
So you knew of, or you might have even met.
No,
Some of those.
they were in North Compound, I was in the Center Compound. But we knew about it because most of them were caught. In fact, 50 were caught out of 26. And 13 of them got back.
What happened to them when they were caught?
Shot by Hitler's orders. 50 of them taken out in the field and lined up.
So your friendly captors, the Luftwaffe types, that told you the way it was,
Yeah.
they would still shoot you if you tried to escape and they caught you.
No, they wouldn't.
They wouldn't.
But the Gestapo will.
But if let's say you escape.
Well, the people in the tower, if they saw you trying to escape,
Yeah.
they would shoot you while you're trying to escape, yes.
Sure.
In fact, they had a warning wire between around the edge, which is about 20 yards from the bar fence, the fence, which you can't go by. If you went across that warning wire, they would shoot you. With no warning, they would shoot you.
So going back before you entered the combat theater, you had very limited rules of engagement training, very limited law of land warfare. Were you told what you could do if you became a lawful POW?
Yep. You let them know you're trying to escape. And we did. With a lot of time, we would do things to keep them busy. We dug tunnels, and they'd bring the dirt up, we'd put it in our pockets, and we'd walk out and throwing that dirt away, knowing that the people in the tower were watching us throwing dirt away.
They saw you do it?
Oh yes, we wanted to see it. Because then they would come in trying to find where's the tunnel. And we would have maybe 4 or 5 tunnels going at once. Not except going far enough anywhere to really get out, but enough to keep them thinking. And the people are coming in all the time. We're trying to find, and we had it pretty well. We had a stove in every barrack, had a barrack. And most of them, they'd move the stove and go down a ladder under the barracks and set the tunnel.
Now,
But one thing about we had strict orders, keep yourself clean and all that sort of stuff, or else we couldn't help it. We had lice and fleas all over the place.
Right.
But we'd always go out and walk. Most of us would go out and walk every bit. Some of the guys just laid in bed. For them, the war is over for them. They don't have a chance. A lot of them later with their head covered up so you can't even see them. And when the Russians came in and they decided they had to move us because they didn't want the Russians to get us, we had to walk in the snow and freezing cold. And most of those guys who stayed in bed just would collapse. They could not make it. They're in such horrible shape, just laying in bed doing nothing, that they collapsed on the road.
were they left? What happened?
For
to
a
them?
while, the Germans would pick them up and put them on a wagon, pulled by a horse.
We've got about 5 minutes left.
But we knew we couldn't escape. In fact, the guards were so old, some of them, we took turns carrying the gun for them.
I've got 5 minutes left on this. Let me wrap this up with a couple things. How long were you at POW?
6.5 months.
And you stayed in Stalag 3 and then...
Nope. In January, when the Russians started coming
Yep.
in, they moved us to Nuremberg, which was Moosburg, was 7A, Luft out of 7A.
How was that in comparison to your first permanent POW facility?
Overcrowded, because they squeezed us all from 2 camps all into one. In fact, there was people came from several camps into 7A. There was no way of heating in the barracks. It was cold as hell. No such thing as hot water.
Same type of treatment?
Hmm?
Same type of treatment by your captor?
Just hungry and scratching fleas.
How were you liberated?
The tanks came in. Back when the Second Army came in, the tanks went through the gate.
How'd you feel?
Oh, you stand in there if you're in another country, and all you look out there, all you see is a swastika flag. You hear the guns going off, and you know they're coming. You see the swastika go down, and the American flag goes up. You never believed how people cry. It's a feeling you can't understand. Most people don't realize how pretty that flag is. There was about 10,000 people there crying.
So you were liberated, and then were you taken immediately back to Britain or
No.
the United States?
We
or?
went to, they had several recovery camps in France set up. And they flew us back to, I went to Camp Lucky Strike. And we had no priority. You had to come back by ship. People were going to go fight in the Pacific, had first priority. We were relieved on April 29th. It was June 2nd before I left to come back in a boat to come back to the States.
So when you were liberated, repatriated, whatever, were you ever debriefed?
No. They took us, we went for physical, and it was, I had the closest thing to debriefing was some guy who claims to be a doctor, a psychiatrist, and asked us how we felt, which one we're fine. We're relieved to be getting out of there. It was a big relief, of course.
Yeah, some experience.
Yeah. Well, you know that tomorrow may be your last day. They said that Hitler's orders are that all POWs be killed, eliminated. Because it takes too much people to guard them and feed them and take care of them. And so every morning you wake up, you wonder, is this the day?
Yeah.
And you're always glad to see that in the evening the sun's going down and the Gestapo hadn't come in yet.
Well, that was an amazing experience. In probably the next minute, are there any closing comments or thoughts you might want to add?
No, just people in this country do not realize how fortunate they are to be in this country. They can spend some time overseas, especially during a war, and see how people in France are had practically nothing, all being mistreated. No food, no cigarettes, not that I care for cigarettes, but that was the best thing you got in Red Cross parcels, and cigarettes, and you could use those to buy anything. A loaf of bread, you know, which was important. But the people in this country don't realize that you can go down to the market and buy the best meat and the best of everything, or wherever you want to go, buy shoes. A lot of people there have no shoes. The shoes are worn out. There's no way they can get replacement shoes. It's amazing the number of people you see in the streets with just rags wrapped around their feet.